Hi, my name's... And I don't even know how to begin to explain what's happening here. But believe it or not, there actually is a reason that I'm cradling way too many Nintendo controllers right now. So throughout the Switch era, I had an eBay store where I would buy broken Nintendo products and fix them up and sell them on. But the Switch era lasted a really long time, so there was some that slipped through the cracks and never really got fixed. So that's what we have here. The rejects, the losers, the ones I didn't show enough love and forgot about. If you're thinking this doesn't look like that many, I've got a box full of them just off camera as well. So this video is going to be really long and boring, so I've kind of sped up quite a bit of it. So the sections where I test all the controllers to see what's wrong with them, where I've neglected them, that kind of thing. And then after that, I'll go through and actually fix them all. So clearly I've got way too many of these things. Here they are falling over, and here's a quick run through of what we're working with. I've got a custom Animal Crossing pair that I shell swap myself. This is a pair of blue, neon blue, pair of neon green. These are my main ones. Pikachu, Let's Go Eevee, white OLED, another white OLED, Animal Crossing official Joycons, Splatoon Joycons, Mario Red again, Mario Red for a third time, Neon Red, which are actually quite rare, Neon Red and Blue, the originals, a left grey by itself times 2, a left and a left blue, and finally one left grey Joy-Con. Slapping the box out the way, it's time to get to work. So I don't actually remember what's wrong with these things. My best guess would be there's a lot of Joy-Con drift where I just ran out of joysticks to replace them. On top of that, there's probably some buttons working, some ribbon cables that I snapped in anger. Also, back in the day, I was really bad for stripping screws, you know, where you mess up the shape of them. So I imagine that's going to be very annoying here. While I'm sure we can all agree this video is boring in its entirety, this part is particularly boring for me as it's time for me to charge the controllers. That's right, all however many of them there are. Now luckily, as you can imagine, a guy with this many Joy-Cons also has a lot of switches and chargers, so it's time to get them going. Not like that. So this feels like a good time as any to explain how I'm going to go about organising these things. I'm basically just going to stick tiny little sticky notes to them to write down what's wrong with them, which we're going to do in the next phase of the video. This is just to make sure we don't mess anything up and don't lose track of what we're doing. First in line to be tested are a pair of the white OLED Joy-Cons. If you have a life, you might not know this, but the Switch actually has a built-in feature for testing stuff like if all your buttons are working and if your joystick has any drift. So that's what I'm using for all these controllers. I started with this pair showing the video full speed just to give you a sense of how we're going to be testing these. I've put these ones in first because they're really boring, to be honest, in terms of the video. They don't seem to have anything wrong with them, so I've just thrown them in as an example of how we're going to be testing them. I've also left this portion in full speed, but from this point on the testing's going to be sped up just because of how many Joy-Cons there are, and I need that video retention. By this point it's clear that both the joysticks are working, and with this final test of the left controller, all the buttons on both of these controllers are working just fine too. We got really lucky with these ones. Or unlucky, because it makes a really boring video. These neon green Joy-Cons were my main pair of controllers for about 4 or 5 years, so needless to say they have been through a lot. I've took these apart more than any other controllers, and from this test it seems like all the joysticks are working, but the main problem is the SL and SR buttons on the right controller. So I jotted that down and put it to the side. Next up, the neon blue Joy-Con pair. This was a shell swap, so I've taken them apart before, definitely. Again, all the buttons seem to be working, and the joysticks, until I got to the right one. Another SL and SR situation. I don't know what was going on here, but it was 2 in a row. Sticking with the theme of the rare pairs, this controller also seemed to have an SL-SR broken situation going on. Again on the right controller, and again everything else seemed to be working just fine. By this point, I'm racking my brain trying to figure out why so many of these are broken. I truly can't remember what young Harry was doing to these things. By this point, I thought I might have been playing a prank on myself or something, because once again, joysticks working, buttons all working except for the right SL and SR. The left Joy-Con was perfectly fine. Finally, with the Splatoon pair, I was relieved. The SL and SR buttons were working. However, I did come to realise pretty quickly that the green Joy-Con, the left one, definitely had drift issues. The pink one seemed fine. I gave it some extra time just to make sure, and it was working fine, so I labelled them up and moved them to the side. Moving off to the first pair of Mario Red Joy-Cons, the right I couldn't get to connect at all, which really scared me because that could have been literally anything. The left one though seemed completely fine, so I put that to the side. The neon red Joy-Con, again, it connected this time, but only the joystick seemed to be working. Its partner, the neon blue one though, seems to be working fine, but again, aside from the SL and SR buttons, joystick's completely fine. The second pair of OLED Joy-Cons, the white ones, also had perfectly working joysticks, and all the button inputs seemed to work fine, which to be honest was no surprise to me because these are the newest of my controllers, as I got them, much later on in the Switch's cycle. Moving on to the next pair of Mario Red Joy-Cons, all the buttons seemed to be working, but the right one had a completely dead stick. I didn't even need to test it, it was just very obvious. The Pikachu and Eevee Joy-Cons had a really weird problem in the sense that everything was working fine, except for the X button on the yellow controller. I really don't know what that's about, but we'll see. It's good for the video anyway. The more mysterious the problem, the more entertaining the fix is going to be. If you can class any of this as entertaining. This next red pair, the left one was fine, the right one just wouldn't seem to want to stay connected. Okay, now these next ones are so crazy that no one's going to even believe me. But that's right. Broken SL and SR buttons once again. On the Joy-Con test, it also seemed for a second that the left controller might have had a bit of drift, but I think it really just needed recalibrating, and I don't think there was anything wrong with it. Next up, the two left grey Joy-Cons, the single ones. I don't even feel the need to say it. You know what's wrong with these. The third grey one had the same issue, only this time it also had a completely dead stick. Now this red controller had the worst drift we'd seen so far. I weirdly got kind of excited that it wasn't an SLSR problem. This controller also had the ZL button just completely missing, so God knows what I did with that, but pushing the button it seemed to still work. The other one of this pair, I just couldn't get it to connect once again, so another mystery. And finally, keeping the tradition alive with the blue Joy-Con, SL and SR once again not working. Everything else seemed fine though, including the joystick. I did some further testing of these things off camera just because it was getting really long and boring to watch, and I eventually realised that there were a few more joysticks that I had drift that I hadn't realised to begin with. So I added those to the labels and set them all up. So that was everything tested, and the only pair that actually didn't need anything doing at all were the 4 white controllers. I've tried to edit these in a way so that every single Joy-Con is as short and sweet as possible because I'm aware there's a lot, and I managed to get each fixed to about 2 minutes each. Let's begin with this first green controller. This screw that you're seeing here was a major problem. I had to wrestle with this thing to get the controller actually open. The reason being that I had absolutely destroyed the track on the screw. I'd stripped it so badly it became almost impossible to open. I had to kind of smash the shell a tiny bit so you can't really tell when it's back together, and then use this pair of pliers to finally get the screw out. From there it was smooth sailing to disassemble this thing and take the battery off. On the bottom of the battery is the type of glue that I used to put back down on these things. It was double-sided tape. I used to really want to make sure that they were stuck down because when I used to shake them playing games and stuff, you could hear the battery moving. This was after I'd removed Nintendo's original glue, and I think I just really overdid it, as you can see here. If you never fixed one before, the joysticks are only held in with 2 screws and 1 tiny cable, so they're fairly painless to replace. I had the old joystick out in basically a few seconds and had the new one in just as quick. All that was left to do was fix all the cables and put everything back together, put all the screws back in, and put the housing back together. Any kind of light coming back on, so this was a good sign, seeing that the Joy-Con rail connected back together properly. And as you can see here, when I went back to the testing screen on my Switch, the Joy-Con was working properly, which puts us at a really good start. Up is our first pair of many Mario Red Joy-Cons. As you can tell from my professional level grading system, for these things needed a new joystick. So I took the label off and got to work taking one of these things apart. Now midway through taking this apart, I got an alarm on my phone, which I'd set for the Nintendo Switch 2 live event. And coming back from it, I'm not going to say that I was disappointed, but where was 3D Mario? Where was it Nintendo? I don't want to wait till Christmas. So I moved through this controller pretty effortlessly, just like I did with the last one. Just the 2 screws and 1 cable holding in the joystick. Without any real struggle, I took it out and replaced it with the brand new one. All that was left to do with this thing was put the housing back together and hope for the best. Once connected to the Switch, it was clear this thing was working. Success number 2. This joystick was basically just copy and pasting the exact same method from the last one. Had the same problem, it's even the same colour. When I take the battery out here, you can see I had to put a lot of effort in. Once again, had that military grade glue in it that I used to use. And here you can see old joystick out and new joystick in. Once this thing was entirely back together and the battery was back in, it definitely was still coming to life, which is a good sign. And once connected to the Switch, it was clear that the joystick was working fine, just like on the other side. Next up, my favourite pair, the 2 neon green controllers. These are the ones that I use the most, and I expected there to be a lot more wrong with them, but nope, just the SL and SR buttons on the right controller. So when I took them apart, I noticed something weird, and it was that the Joy-Con LED status indicator actually seemed to work when I held the cable in a straight line. I suppose that what's happened here is that over time the cable is just bent, and maybe I didn't put it back in properly, I'm not sure. I had hoped because of this that I'd just be able to straighten out the cable, but no, in doing so I did snap it. So I moved that piece to the side, and I'm really lazy. I really like to keep the controller together as much as I can, but I felt like I was going to have to take off the middle section to get rid of the rest of that snap piece of debris that was lying in the connector. Means it's time for us to finally use one of our brand new SLSR connectors. I made sure I had the right one and fitted it onto the motherboard. Luckily it's really easy to test that these things are working because you can just push the button on the board itself without it being back together, and if it lights up then you know it's working. Swapping these things out is another painless process. It's just 2 screws holding it in, you just got to make sure that you don't lose the buttons when you pull it up. And after that really all you've got to do is screw the new board in place where the old one was. And here I did actually manage to get a shot of the buttons working properly, as you can see. After connecting up the other flex cable that lets the Switch know the Joy-Con's connected, all that was left to do was put the controller back together. Everything was working. At this point I'm feeling pretty proud of myself because we're at a 100% success rate, with another pair of controllers being 100% functional. So with that it was time to move on to the next pair of Joy-Cons. The official Animal Crossing shells. With this again it was just the right one, SL and SR, so hopefully it should be as easy as all the others. Taking this apart, it was once again clear that the cable had just been snapped clean in half, so I had to unplug it again from the board so that I could replace it. This time I was really happy it came apart with no issues, no stripped screws. This thing was pretty much in perfect condition aside from this one broken cable. That meant hopefully all we had to do, if we were following what had happened with all the other controllers, is to just screw this brand new board in and hope for the best. After connecting the flex cable, I instantly got those lights coming up again on the LEDs, so it seemed again that this was working. Once again, all the cables just needed to go back together. I'd unplugged the NFC antenna, which I regretted so badly, because that thing is really annoying to get back in. But apart from that, all back together really well. I've also decided to cut me screwing back in all the screws for these cases, because, I mean, you guys know what it looks like to turn a screwdriver. It gets boring after a while. But once those screws were back in, that was it. Another pair of Joy-Cons working completely well. This is exactly what I was hoping for. Onto the neon blue pair, which I think are really cool, by the way. It is the SL and SR once again on this right Joy-Con. On the left controller, I've also done a mod that I did really long time ago, where the LEDs are blue on that connector. These can be changed to pretty much any colour if that's something people would like a video on and someone's still paying attention by now. Let me know. We were once again blessed by the Nintendo gods with 0 strip screws, and I got into this thing really easily. And no super sticky adhesive on the battery as well, which is always pleasant. And just when things were going really well, that's when it happened. I accidentally unplugged the trigger cable, Which, if you've ever tried to fix a Joy-Con before, this thing is the bane of my life. The cable's so short coming around the corner of the shell that you literally spend hours trying to get it back in, but that's for off-camera Harry's problem. With the looming threat of putting that cable back into place after this was done, fixing the SLSR felt pretty easy considering how many times we've done it. I'm practically an expert by now. Like I mentioned earlier, I spared you guys the pain of having to watch this. This took me way too long. As far as I'm aware, this is something you will never get better at plugging back in, no matter how many times you do it. Nintendo did this purely to make us feel pain, I'm convinced. Once it was back in, everything else felt really easy, just putting all the screws back together and connecting this Joy-Con back together. Then that was it, another consecutive success. Now, luckily for everyone involved on these custom Animal Crossing controllers, this wasn't just SL and SR, but in fact SL and SR plus joystick. That's how you know things are getting crazy. Thought it was worth noting as well that this controller comes apart extremely easy, like compared to all those tri-wing screws, because when I had originally fitted these shells onto the grey Joy-Cons that they came from, I used these Phillips screws instead. And compared to the absolute rubbish that Nintendo puts in these things, it was just so much easier. You guys know the drill here. Snapped cable, just needs replacing. The new board was in, and thanks to me very safely leaving the battery plugged in while I did all this, I got the LEDs coming on straight away, so I knew it was all working. In my excitement, I did forget to replace the joystick, but I did it again as soon as I ended the recording. So, finally putting it all back together with those amazing screws, this thing was perfect again. Now, I kind of wish those grey buttons weren't there because they don't go with the controllers, but that's another completely functioning pair. On the neon red and blue pair, we actually had something kind of intriguing on the red one in the fact that all the buttons weren't working. So I decided to quickly get through the SLSR and the blue one first, because it just feels the more predictable, boring one, and I'd rather save the other one for last. Now, you've all seen what goes on here just as much as 2018 Harry had seen Infinity War in the cinema. It's basically just rinse and repeat. We take the Joy-Con apart with as little hassle as possible. We replace the SLSR connector, put the new one in, and everything works fine. Put it back together, and we're good. Just to give myself a sanity check, I'm just going to leave this as some lo-fi beats playing over this montage. So that's half the pair fully working, and we can move on to the more interesting one. I was actually really intrigued by this because I couldn't really for the life of me figure out what would stop all the buttons from working just off the top of my head. So I just went like I normally would and took this thing apart, unplugged the battery, all that kind of thing. So once I unscrewed the middle panel and I could see actually what was happening with the main motherboard, I came across a problem that just made me think the entire board might be destroyed, to be honest. As you can see here, that SLSR connector had come back to bite us once again, but in a much different way this time. I figured the board had been water damaged or maybe melted perhaps, because honestly, the chances of this happening and all the buttons being broken. So I tried to connect it and it seemed to be working, but again, no buttons. This was after I gave it a really good clean with some isopropyl alcohol, which is just surgical spirit or rubbing alcohol, but I just couldn't get any life out of the buttons. I really tried to get this thing disconnected as well, without causing any damage to the board, but there was just no chance. It was like really welded in there, the wire just wouldn't come out, and eventually I just snapped the connector off by accident. I mean, I knew it was coming, but it was an accident. As you can see here, I decided that this board was a write-off, and I was just going to use it for parts on other Joy-Cons. So, half a pair, I'm still happy. Now, this next Mario Red set, things actually got really confusing during the filming. So what you're seeing here turned out to be a pair of clone controllers that I'd forgotten I bought and reviewed on a previous YouTube channel. So I moved on to a different set because I realised they just needed charging because of how long the batteries had been dead, and there was nothing wrong with them. This one that you're seeing here though is from the other Mario Red set. I was having a really hard time getting this thing open. It obviously has a button missing, but the button still works, it's just missing. But it was like this thing was soldered together or something, the plastic had melted into itself. So even with the screws out, it just wouldn't come apart. I tried the same alcohol that I used before to try and see if I could get rid of any grime that might have been holding it together, but it just wasn't having it. I was using my trusty iFixit knife, spudger, spoon looking thing, and eventually it came apart, but it took me so long, I'm talking like 45 minutes, that my camera died during this. And I didn't actually get the footage, but honestly it wasn't that great to watch anyway. And needless to say, I got the button replaced and everything started working properly. On to the next of these mysterious question mark Mario Red Joy-Cons. I really couldn't catch a break with these things, but it turned out that this one actually was a really easy fix. So it wasn't connecting to the switch initially, like I couldn't get any life out of it at all. I was pretty sure this thing was going in the bin, but no. I somehow didn't realise that that could all be because of one cable. So as soon as I connected that Joy-Con connector rail back onto the board, it had somehow come loose. It seemed to be working, so I pulled my switch over and tested it out, and it was. Everything seemed to be completely fine with this thing. I let it charge up later on, and it was working wireless, the joystick was working, all the buttons working. So this pair was working perfectly fine again. And please ignore that my battery operated light was turned off for a sec here. It doesn't last very long and it's trying its best. The Pikachu Let's Go Eevee and Pikachu... What am I saying? Anyway, these Joy-Cons, the X button wasn't working. Now, I had a hunch that maybe I'd be able to fix this without taking it apart. It was a real Hail Mary prayer I was throwing out here. I was asking for a miracle. But I basically just rubbed the cotton bud around the X button and let the alcohol kind of seep into it in the hopes that any grime or dirt that might have been stopping the connection would break down and the button would work again. I plugged it into my console for the moment of truth, and as soon as I opened the test input devices menu, I went straight for that X button and it seemed to be working. Unbelievably, that's all it took. Sometimes it's that simple, you don't even need to be able to use a screwdriver. I just gave it one more clean just to be sure that I hadn't missed anything, but I was pretty happy with this. As far as I was concerned, both of these controls were working perfectly once again. Next up was some of these solo grey controllers that we had, both SL and SR, as you can imagine. So I took these apart effortlessly. Battery wasn't too soldered down. I took out the middle section. I undid that one connector that holds it all together, unscrewed it, and put in the new board. After checking my notes also, I realised I'd labelled this thing slightly wrong, and it also needed a new joystick, so I just really simply took that out, just the 2 screws once again. I don't know how I didn't notice because it was literally falling to pieces, but anyway, the new one went in just fine and it seemed to be working. So that was more than good enough for me, and I moved on to the next controller. The second of these things had the exact same issue until I started taking it apart. One of the screws was stripped really badly. I ended up having to snap the entire casing off, but luckily enough I have replaced a lot of grey Joy-Con shells in the past, so I didn't have a problem just smashing this off and replacing it with one of the spare Joy-Con backplates that I already have. I say smash, as you can see here I kind of just twisted it off and then attacked it with a pair of pliers, and eventually it all came out. I desperately kept the screw to the side so that I didn't try and put it back in. And after that, I just moved all of the Joy-Con rail over to the new piece. Unlike taking the Joy-Con apart, this is really easy and only actually involves one screw. Then I fixed what we actually came here to do, which I'd kind of forgotten about by this point, to be honest. The SLSR connector. Took out the old one and put the new one in. And as soon as this was all back together, it was clear that we had another success, completely working. Finally onto the last 2 single Joy-Cons. Another SL and SR plus stick on this grey controller. Again, nothing too hard. This time it was clear the ribbon cable was broken and there were no screws stopping us from taking the controller apart. This was really another simple swap. I was going through a lot of these boards. I'm really glad that I got the bulk discount when I ordered them. After that, I just swapped out the joystick. This one was completely destroyed. There's no way this could have stayed. I sealed everything back up, put all the screws and connectors back in, and this was another perfectly fine Joy-Con. Everything was working, and it was time to move on to our very last controller. Let's be honest with ourselves here, it would have felt weird if we finished on anything other than an SL and an SR bone. So keeping with tradition, popped open the battery, took all the screws out and undid the middle piece. As you may expect, I just took apart the one piece that was still connected, unplugged it from the board and unscrewed it, and plugged in our final new SLSR connector. I put the middle piece back together and put the battery in, and once I folded it without snapping the new cable, everything was working fine. And that was our final Joy-Con completely done. We'd had a really successful run at this point. I was feeling really happy. And that's it. We've been through every single one of those controllers. If we zoom out here, you can see 26 now fully functioning Joy-Con controllers. I'm terrible at maths, but we've fixed a large percentage of these, almost all of them now properly working, aside from the two red ones, which are of course now residing within the shame corner, where they will stay for the rest of their miserable, broken existence. I hear yourself asking, what's next? What am I doing with these things? Well, for now I'm just going to pack them up and put them in a box under my bed. Eventually I'll be bothered enough to sell them, probably when the payment comes out for that Switch 2 pre-order. Because seriously, those prices are insane. I mean, the console, obviously I've got to buy Mario and Donkey Kong as well. I'm not going without those things. Regardless, I think these sticky notes show that you don't need to throw away your broken tech. It's really easy to fix these things. Just have a go. As you can imagine, I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. We went from having almost none of these working to almost all of them. If you made it this far, this is my honest advice to go and see a therapist. Please, you should not be spending your time in this way. But seriously, thanks for watching.